Amid the cold gleam of Manhattan's skyscrapers, Thomas Delaney lived as if nothing and no one could ever bring him down. Luxury, power, influence. But it took just one act of abandonment to shatter his empire and reveal who truly stood by his side. Ben Carter, the quiet janitor at his company. This isn't just a story about judgment. It's about the value of friendship, justice, and how the smallest acts can change destinies. Stay sharp. The truth might come from where you least expect it. Manhattan woke up stifling that Tuesday. The sky, covered in heavy, threatening clouds, seemed to reflect the tension looming over the glass tower of Delaney Enterprises. The city didn't stop. Honking horns, hurried footsteps, helicopters slicing through the sky. But on the 45th floor, inside Thomas Delaney's executive office, silence reigned like a bad omen. Thomas stood by the panoramic window, hands clasped behind his back, taking deep breaths. His towering reflection blended into the skyline of skyscrapers. His face, once always composed, was now tense. The papers called him the Goliath of real estate. But even Goliath fell one day. "Mr. Delaney, the car is ready," said Anne, his secretary, her voice soft and hesitant. "He confirmed, didn't he? Hale's going to be there." "Yes, sir. He confirmed last night. Said everything's under control." Thomas nodded without turning. But something inside him ached, a quiet unease, almost like a warning. He turned, grabbed his leather briefcase, and walked to the elevator. As he descended, elsewhere in the building, 5 floors underground, Ben Carter was scrubbing the floor vigorously. It was his last section of the day. Thin, slightly hunched, wearing thick gloves and headphones playing soft instrumental music, his observant eyes still scanned the hallways carefully. "That trial, you think he's gonna get off?" asked Jack the janitor, leaning on his broom. "A man like him?" "They always do." "Yeah, but word is there's hard evidence this time." Ben just shrugged. He put away the bucket, but something made him stop. The door to Richard Hale's office, the attorney, was slightly ajar. That was rare. Richard was obsessively meticulous. Ben pushed the door gently. The office was a mess. Drawers left open, a half-empty whiskey glass, papers scattered across the floor. In the middle of the desk sat a manila envelope, Thomas Delaney's name scribbled on it in shaky handwriting. Ben furrowed his brow. At the federal courthouse, cameras flashed with every step Thomas took. He walked like a bull ready to charge, ignoring the press, flanked by 2 security guards. "Mr. Delaney, what's your response to the phantom contracts? What about the offshore account in Belize? Are you planning to plead guilty?" Thomas stopped, turned slightly and said, "Silence is the shield of the innocent. Let's see who's been talking too much." Inside the packed courtroom, Thomas took his place at the defense table. It was 9:40 a.m. He checked his phone every 2 minutes. "Where the hell is Richard?" "He's probably on his way," Anne replied, pale as paper. 9:50. Nothing. 9:55. Still nothing. 10:00. The judge entered. Thomas's heart pounded. Still no sign of his lawyer. "Mr. Delaney, your legal representative has not appeared. Would you like the court to assign a public defender?" "This is a mistake. Richard Hale. He's coming." "Time's up. We'll begin with the prosecution." Thomas stood abruptly. He stumbled out of the room, eyes of the court glued to him. Anne followed closely, handing him the envelope Ben had delivered to security just minutes earlier. He opened it and went pale. "Thomas, you paid me well, but the other side made an offer I couldn't refuse. Good luck with your trial. R.H." He stared at the letter in disbelief. His eyes began to well up, but quickly turned to ice. His jaw clenched. Traitor. Damn traitor. Outside, by the rear entrance, Ben watched from a distance, gripping his cleaning supply bag tightly. "No one should have to go through that alone," he murmured. The back hallway of the courthouse was empty. Only the echo of distant verdicts filled the heavy air, as if the walls remembered every judgment, every cry, every sentence ever delivered. Ben Carter stood silently next to his cleaning cart, eyes fixed on the movement beyond the frosted glass. "You're not supposed to be here, Carter," murmured Jack the custodian, approaching quietly. "I know." "Then why are you standing there like a damn statue?" "Because something's off. I felt it yesterday, and today just confirmed it. That guy, yeah, maybe he did some bad things, but he got left behind like a dog. No one deserves that." In a side room of the courthouse, Thomas Delaney slammed his fist against the table. His face was flushed with rage. Anne tried to calm him, but her hands were trembling. "That bastard left me alone. Alone, Anne, on the most important day of my life. Thomas, the judge gave you until the end of the day to bring in another lawyer. We can call another firm. Try someone else. No one's going to take my case last minute, and I don't trust anyone anymore." "Then what are you going to do?" "Fight, alone, like I always have." Ben listened from the cracked doorway, gripping his broom tightly. A memory slashed through his mind like a blade. He could still remember the first time he saw Thomas years ago, in the cold halls of the company, kicking an employee for delivering a report late. And still, something was pulling him forward. He took a breath and knocked on the door. "Excuse me, what do you want? Can't you see we're busy?" Thomas growled, not even turning around. "I saw what happened. I know I have no right, but maybe I can help." Thomas laughed, a bitter, mocking laugh. "You, the janitor? Help? What, you gonna save me with a mop and a broom?" "No, with knowledge. I studied law, almost finished my degree before life fell apart. I know procedure, I can analyze evidence, and I know your situation is bad." Anne looked at Ben as if seeing a ghost. "Wait. You studied law?" "At NYU, 4 years. But then my father died. My mother got sick. I dropped everything, took this job because it put food on the table." Thomas folded his arms. "And why the hell should I trust you?" "Because I've been watching you for 2 years. I know how you think, what you hide, what you're afraid of. I know more about you than any lawyer you've ever paid. And because I still believe maybe you deserve a second chance." Silence. Thomas stared at him like he wanted to explode, but beneath the fury there was a flicker, something Ben had never seen in him before. Doubt, humanity. "You're insane, you know that." "Probably, but I'm the only one here." The clock read 1:47 p.m., just over 2 hours left before the hearing resumed. Thomas took a deep breath, looked at Anne, then back at Ben. "If you make a fool of me in front of that judge, I'll fire you and sue you. If I screw this up, I'm already losing way more than you, Mr. Delaney." Thomas hesitated, then extended his hand. "All right then. Counselor, impress me." The makeshift conference room smelled of stale coffee and tension. Anne spread documents across the table. The air conditioner hummed too loudly, and the ticking clock seemed to mock their race against time. Ben Carter, no longer in his janitor's uniform but wearing a wrinkled white shirt, was deep into folders and printed emails. Across the table, Thomas Delaney watched him with skepticism, arms crossed, jaw clenched, eyes narrow. "You're telling me you can actually go through all of this?" "No. I'm saying I need to, fast. You're not going to save me with goodwill, Carter. This isn't some redemption story. It's a federal trial." "Then maybe it's time you stopped seeing people as tools, Thomas. I'm here, aren't I? Use that." Thomas scoffed but didn't reply. Ben grabbed a specific folder. Subcontractor Agreements 2023. He began flipping through the pages, eyes sharp. "These signatures, something's off here. Look at this one." He held out a document, signed by the lead executive. But this guy died in 2021. How did he sign a contract last year? "What?" Thomas stepped forward, snatching the paper. "That came from the legal department. Hale handled all of this." Or manipulated it, Ben said quietly. Maybe Richard never planned to defend you, Thomas. Maybe he was just covering his own tracks. The billionaire stared at the janitor like he was seeing a new version of the world. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Anne spoke up, holding a flash drive. I found this in Richard's drawer while we were cleaning out the office yesterday. I almost threw it away, but something told me to keep it. Ben plugged the drive into the laptop. Videos, meeting recordings. One file stood out: confidential, prosecution, Hale. Oh my God! What is it? Thomas asked, impatient. Ben hit play. On the screen, Richard was speaking to someone, the lead prosecutor. He's guilty up to his neck, but I'll convince him to take the deal. Deep down, he knows there's no way out. And when this is over, you give me that consulting spot at the DA's office like we agreed. Thomas sat down slowly, like he'd just taken a punch to the gut. He sold me out. Yes, and now we have the proof. Silence. This could change everything, Anne whispered. It could, Ben said, but there's a problem. This recording was obtained without a warrant. If we use it, it might get thrown out. Then what do we do? Thomas asked, genuinely vulnerable now. Ben looked him straight in the eye. You're going to have to trust me. You're going to have to tell the truth, all of it, including what you tried to hide. There's no winning this with lies anymore, Thomas. This is all or nothing now. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a low voice, there's something no one knows. A transfer. An account. Ben leaned in. Then now's the time to start being honest. With me and with the law. The room fell silent after Thomas said, There's something no one knows. The distant sound of a helicopter cutting through the sky served as the soundtrack for what came next. Anne stopped typing. Ben removed his glasses and clasped his hands on the table, eyes locked on Thomas. This was the moment of truth. Talk, Thomas, now, Ben said, his voice blending urgency and authority. 2 years ago, during a land negotiation in Brooklyn, I was warned that one of our partners was threatening to report some tax irregularities. I made a decision. Ben didn't blink. What decision? I wired $5 million to an international account in his daughter's name to shut him up. You bribed a whistleblower? Anne whispered, horrified. Yes, Thomas replied, staring into the void. And it wasn't about the money. It was fear. I was already buried too deep. Ben stood, took 2 steps away from the table, hands on his head. You want me to defend you, knowing you're guilty? Not entirely. The fraud I'm being accused of now, that I didn't do. That was Richard. He set me up. But the transfer, yes, that was me. I'm not asking you to cover it up. I'm asking you to help me make it right. Make it right? Ben let out a bitter laugh. You spent your life crushing people like me. Now you want to fix it with words? Thomas stood as well. He walked up to Ben and stopped in front of him. I was a monster, but today you're the only person still looking me in the eyes without fear. You want justice? Then help me face this, the right way. Ben stared at him. For the first time, he didn't see just the billionaire. He saw the man, flawed, regretful, fragile. If I bring this into court, they'll eat you alive. But if you show you're willing to cooperate, we might have a shot, a real one. Anne, silent until now, stood slowly. I have a contact at the DA's office. She might be willing to hear us out. It won't be easy, but it could open a door. Thomas nodded. I'm in, whatever it takes. Ben picked up his phone, typed something, took a deep breath. Then that's it. The war has begun. But this time, we're in it together. The district attorney's office had scheduled the informal hearing with Thomas for 3 p.m. There were still 28 minutes left when Ben stepped out of the room, documents in hand. The courthouse hallway was busier now, and the looks people gave him had changed. He was no longer the janitor. He was the man who dared to defend the untouchable. Ben's face was a mix of focus and doubt, like someone walking on thin ice. Inside the room, Thomas remained seated, fingers drumming impatiently on the table. Anne typed something on her laptop, but her eyes betrayed concern. "Is he coming back before it starts?" Thomas asked. "He's handling the paperwork for the plea proposal," Anne replied. "He puts too much faith in this idea of justice. He's going to be disappointed." "Or he'll surprise you," she said, without looking up from her screen. Ben returned and placed the papers on the table. All set. But before we go, he opened the laptop and clicked on a paused video. This popped up in Richard's email cloud just now. The password was on a sticky note behind a picture frame in his office. On screen, a Zoom meeting began playing. Richard Hale appeared, laughing, sipping whiskey, and on the other side of the screen, a familiar face. Thomas went pale. "That's Martin Pierce?" "Yes," Ben confirmed. "Your former business partner. The one who vanished from the company the same month the DA started digging around. He's behind this, Thomas. Hale didn't act alone." In the video, Martin spoke. "Let Delaney take the fall. I'll guarantee your immunity, Richard. But he has to break first. That's the only way they'll leave me out of it, and you get your spot at the top." Thomas stood slowly. "That bastard. He always envied me, always wanted what I had. And now he has the chance to take everything from you, using your own signature on the contracts." Ben paused the video. "We're going to show this to the DA, prove there's a bigger conspiracy. But we have to be careful. If Martin still has influence, he might have eyes inside." Anne nodded. "Elizabeth, the prosecutor, she's tough but fair. Maybe we can trust her." The clock read 2:55 p.m. It was time. Before leaving, Thomas paused next to Ben. "You sure about this, Carter? It's not just my name on the line anymore. They'll come after you too." Ben met his eyes. "I've already lost everything once. If I'm going down again, let it be for something that matters." The DA's office was cold, bare walls and utilitarian furniture. No paintings, no decorations, just paperwork, hard chairs, and the imposing presence of Elizabeth Monroe, federal prosecutor. Her eyes studied every movement, as if searching for invisible truths in words that hadn't yet been spoken. Thomas entered first, tense, but walking with dignity. Ben followed close behind, folder under his arm. Anne waited outside. "Mr. Delaney, Mr. Carter," said Elizabeth, her voice precise and calm. "Prosecutor," Thomas replied, taking a seat. Elizabeth looked directly at Ben. "You understand you have no formal credentials to act as legal counsel here?" "I understand. I'm here as a citizen with legal knowledge, trying to support a cooperation proposal." "Very well, let that be noted." She opened a notepad and folded her hands. "Let's get to the point. I'm told you have relevant information about evidence tampering in the case against Thomas Delaney. I'm listening." Ben placed the flash drive on the table. This video file shows Richard Hale, Thomas's former attorney, in a meeting with Martin Pierce, a former partner and likely orchestrator of the tax fraud scheme. Hale admits to sabotaging the defense and protecting Martin. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "Do you have legal authorization for this recording?" "No. It was recovered from an automatic email backup, but it could serve as grounds for a new investigation." Elizabeth watched the video in silence. When it ended, she closed the laptop without changing her expression. "Impressive, but not enough. I need more. I need Thomas." She turned to him. "I want a formal confession about the 2023 whistleblower bribe, the foreign account transfers, and the forged contracts you knowingly signed. In return, I can offer house arrest and partial asset freeze." Thomas took a deep breath. And if I turn over Martin, if you give us evidence, real, verifiable evidence, we may be able to negotiate full immunity, but you'll have to waive banking secrecy and testify publicly. Ben looked at Thomas. This is your shot, but there's no going back. The silence stretched into eternity. Thomas had gone pale. The wall behind Elizabeth seemed to spin. If I do this, I lose everything. Not everything, Elizabeth said. You gain something you've never had. Redemption. Thomas lowered his head. His eyes began to fill. I accept. I'll give you Martin, and everything I've done. It's time to end this. Elizabeth nodded. Start now. I want the account details and the wire records, and a recorded statement. You have until the end of the day. They stood. Ben gently touched Thomas's shoulder. Pride got you nowhere, but courage might. Outside, Anne saw the two men walk out and smiled. It was late afternoon in New York. The sky, once heavy and grey, now burned in shades of orange. From the 12th floor of a federal building, Thomas Delaney was signing the final document of his confession. His hands trembled. His fingertips were sweating. He never imagined he'd write his own name to admit guilt, and yet he felt a strange sense of relief. Ben stood quietly nearby. There were no words left in that moment, only the muted sound of pen on paper and the steady ticking of the clock, announcing that time was, finally, turning. You are now officially cooperating with the government, said Elizabeth Monroe. And Martin? Thomas asked. With your statement, we have the authority to issue a warrant, but we need his location. Where is he hiding? Thomas hesitated. Then, staring straight at the prosecutor, he said, He has a house outside the city, Cold Spring, remote place, no cameras. He thought no one knew, but I knew. Elizabeth gave a signal. An agent left the room in a hurry to initiate the warrant process. We're going after him tonight. Ben felt a chill run down his spine. Prosecutor, I strongly suggest you tighten security. If Martin knows Thomas is talking, he'll react. Outside, Anne waited nervously. When Ben and Thomas stepped out, she rushed to them. What happened? I gave them everything, Thomas said, exhausted. Now it's in their hands. And yours too, Ben added. You're not safe yet. As they made their way down to the lobby, something felt off. The usual security guard wasn't at his post. A different man stood there, still, staring intently at Thomas. Ben approached cautiously. Good afternoon. What's your name? Jenkins. First day here? Transferred today. But there was something in his tone. Cold, too precise. Ben grabbed Thomas's arm. We're leaving through the back. Anne picked up on it instantly and followed without a word. In the side alley, an unmarked car was waiting. But just as they approached, a sharp sound rang out, a gunshot. They all ducked instinctively. Screams. The car window shattered. Ben scanned the area. The shooter was on a rooftop across the street. Run! They bolted down the opposite alley. Thomas was gasping for air, eyes wide with panic. Anne was shaking. Ben gripped his arm tightly. He knows. Martin knows. And now he's coming for all of us. Thomas's apartment was cloaked in shadows. The windows were covered with thick blinds. 2 federal agents stood guard at the entrance. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Anne was finishing bandaging Thomas's arm, wounded by shrapnel from the car during the attack, but what hurt most wasn't physical. It's been almost 2 hours since he disappeared, Anne said. Did he say where he was going? No. He just said, I need some air, and vanished. His phone's off. Thomas stood, unsteady on his feet. He shouldn't have gone out, not now. He's in danger. We're all in danger, Thomas, but more than anyone, you should understand. Ben needs space. You have no idea what he's feeling right now. Thomas turned, frustrated. What do you mean? He gave you everything, Thomas. He risked his life for you. And what did you do? Pulled him into the middle of a gunfight. You talk about redemption, but you still think like a king. He's not your soldier. Silence. Thomas sank into the couch, breathing heavily, his face sweaty, worn out. Outside, in a nearly empty park, Ben sat on a bench, his shirt still dust-stained, eyes fixed on the ground. He slowly spun his phone in his hands. He wasn't answering any calls. He was at war with himself. An older man in a plain suit, someone he didn't know, sat beside him. You look like a man who just witnessed the end of something he believed in. Ben gave a humorless smile. It's not the end, but it feels like everything lost its meaning. I did everything right. I got involved out of compassion, out of a sense of justice. And now, I'm a target, a pawn. Sometimes, you have to lose control to find out who you really are. And what if I'm not the hero they think I am? Then just be the guy who didn't run when things got tough. That's already more than most. Ben looked up at the sky, as if searching for an answer. His phone buzzed again. It was Anne. He picked up. Ben, thank God. Are you okay? I'm alive. He's worried. He's here, waiting for you. Thomas, he's changed, Ben. You made that happen. I'm not sure it was enough. Anne took a breath. Then come back, at least to finish what you started. Ben ended the call. He sat in silence a few more minutes, breathing deeply, taking in the city with tired eyes. Then slowly he stood and began walking back. Meanwhile, Thomas stared out the window. Alone. A man who had spent his life building walls around himself, now hoping that just one bridge hadn't been destroyed forever. The federal courtroom was packed. Lawyers, journalists, law students, and curious onlookers filled every available seat. Outside, cameras flashed as reporters jostled for position, waiting for the arrival of Thomas Delaney, the billionaire accused of fraud, now dressed in a simpler suit and wearing a changed expression. Anne adjusted papers at the defense table, visibly tense. The judge had already entered and taken his seat. But Ben still hadn't arrived. Thomas checked the clock every minute. Each second that passed felt like a warning that he might once again be alone. He's coming, Anne whispered. And if he doesn't, then you finish what you started. Be the man he saw in you. Then the back doors opened. Ben walked in. Light dress shirt, plain blazer, hair slightly unkempt, but his eyes were steady. He walked toward the defense bench with quiet dignity. The murmurs in the courtroom stopped. Even the judge took notice. You came, Thomas said. I said I'd see this through. I'm here, but after this, I go my own way. The judge struck the gavel. Let's begin. Prosecution, please. Prosecutor Elizabeth stood, composed and firm. Your Honor, Mr. Thomas Delaney stands accused of tax fraud, contract manipulation and bribery. However, in light of the evidence submitted by the defense and based on the defendant's active cooperation, we are requesting a reclassification of charges and the inclusion of a new name in the case, Martin Pierce. A wave of murmurs spread through the room. We have an issued warrant. Mr. Pierce is currently being taken into custody by the task force, and we would like to submit as evidence the video testimony of Mr. Delaney and the materials provided by Mr. Benjamin Carter. Thomas looked at Ben with respect. For the first time, there was silence between them. Not empty silence, but one filled with recognition. The judge reviewed the documents. We will admit the material into evidence, and we will await the interrogation of the new defendant. Suddenly, the courtroom doors opened again. 2 agents entered, escorting Martin Pierce in handcuffs. He held his head high, even in custody. When he passed Thomas, he gave a mocking smile. Never thought you'd fall this far, he muttered. Thomas didn't respond. He just stared back with a steady gaze Martin had never seen before. Elizabeth turned to the judge. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to hear a personal statement from Benjamin Carter, the citizen who made this trial possible." Ben swallowed hard. He stood and walked to the witness stand. All eyes were on him. Cameras were rolling. It was his moment to speak. "My name is Benjamin Carter. I'm not a lawyer, at least not officially. I'm a janitor, but more than that, I'm a man who's seen injustice up close. I've mopped the floors of people who step on others without looking down. I've watched lives get crushed by greed." He turned to Thomas. "And against all odds, I chose to believe that even the most broken people can change." The courtroom was silent. "The truth brought me here, but what will decide this trial is whether we still believe that justice is worth more than power." He returned to his seat. Thomas looked at him, eyes brimming. There were no words left. The judge took a deep breath. "We will reconvene tomorrow for the verdict." The sky that morning was clear, as if the universe had decided to offer a moment of peace. Inside the courtroom, silence reigned. Even the cameras seemed to breathe more quietly. Everyone waited for the verdict that would bring one of the most unexpected trials of the year to a close. Thomas Delaney sat with his hands clasped. His eyes no longer searched for journalists, businessmen, or rivals. They searched only for Ben, seated quietly, 2 chairs away. Anne, eyes tired but proud, watched them like someone witnessing something rare, the rebirth of a man. The judge entered, adjusted his glasses, picked up the paper in front of him, took a deep breath. After reviewing the documents, recordings, witness statements, and the voluntary cooperation of the defendant, Thomas Delaney, this court rules: guilty of tax fraud and bribery, with sentence mitigation due to cooperation. The sentence will be 18 months of house arrest, 3 years of commercial disqualification, and 50% of assets frozen for public restitution. A collective exhale swept through the courtroom. Thomas lowered his head. He had accepted the price of truth. The judge continued, "This court also formally recognizes the courageous and civic actions of Benjamin Carter, whose efforts directly contributed to the dismantling of an active corruption network." All eyes turned to Ben. He didn't celebrate. He simply nodded quietly, like a man who knew he'd done what needed to be done. Martin Pierce, on the other side of the room, was led out in handcuffs under far heavier charges: active corruption, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. He looked around like a cornered animal. Outside, sunlight hit the courthouse steps. Thomas exited through a side door, Ben at his side. "You didn't have to see this through," Thomas said, "but I did, because someone had to. Are you staying with the company?" "No, that chapter of my life ends here." Thomas hesitated, then pulled a key from his pocket. "There's a room in the new community center in Queens. I want it to be yours, to study, to teach, to use however you like." "Trying to pay your debt?" "No. Trying to give back. For real." Ben took the key, smiled. "Maybe there's hope for you yet." They hugged, briefly, the kind of hug shared by those who've walked through hell together, and watched from a distance, eyes glistening with quiet joy. Ben descended the courthouse steps and disappeared into the crowd. Free, dignified, changed. Thomas stayed there for a few moments, looking up at the clear sky. For the first time in years, he felt light. The moral of the story: justice isn't revenge, it's transformation. And sometimes true courage isn't about never making mistakes, it's about facing them, asking for forgiveness, and choosing to change. Even the most powerful can fall, but only those who truly repent have a chance to rise again. Have you ever given or received a second chance that changed everything? Share your story in the comments. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel for more dramas that inspire, stir emotions, and make you think.